Be me, 25, just trying to navigate the absolute dumpster fire that is modern dating. My best friend, let's call him Jim, is basically my emergency contact for emotional support. We've known each other forever, and he's usually the only one who gets it. Or at least, he used to be. We were at our regular coffee spot a few months back. I was having one of those days where every man on the planet seemed to be personally trying to annoy me. My phone was practically buzzing with notifications from dating apps, each one a fresh new disappointment. I showed Jim my screen, just to prove I wasn't exaggerating. The profile of some guy, probably late 20s, was up. Standard handsome-ish face, generic bio about liking hiking and craft beer. But then there was the third picture. The classic, the infamous, the unforgivable fish picture. A grown man, holding a dead fish, smiling like he'd just solved world hunger. I physically recoiled and swiped left, with such force I nearly dropped my phone. Jim just looked at me over his mug and asked what was so wrong with that. I had to actually explain it to him. It's not about the fish itself. It's about what the fish represents. It screams a total lack of self-awareness, zero creativity, and an almost certain guarantee that his entire personality is outdoorsy. He probably thinks a perfect date is waking up at 5 a.m. to go sit in a swamp. Jim just nodded slowly, like he was trying to process some complex algorithm. He said maybe the guy was just proud of his hobby. That's the thing with Jim. He always tries to see the other side of things, which is really just code for defending mediocre male behavior. I moved on to my next complaint, a guy I actually went on a date with the week before. He seemed promising at first. Good job, dressed well, could hold a conversation. We were talking about TV shows, and he asked if I'd seen this one particular sci-fi series. I told him I hadn't gotten around to it yet. That should have been the end of it. A normal person would say, "Oh, you should check it out," and move on. Not this guy. He proceeded to give me a full 5-minute unsolicited lecture on the show's intricate plot, character arcs, and thematic depth. He wasn't just telling me about it, he was explaining it to me, as if I were a child who couldn't possibly grasp the concept of a space opera without his expert guidance. I just sat there, smiling and nodding, while inside I was composing a doctoral thesis on the pervasiveness of male condescension. When I recounted this to Jim, his first question was whether the guy was maybe just excited about the show. I had to tell him that intention doesn't negate impact. It was classic mansplaining. He was assuming a position of authority on a topic for no reason. Jim got this thoughtful look on his face and said, "But isn't that just what people do when they're passionate about something? Try to share it?" I told him it was different when a man does it to a woman. It's about the underlying dynamic. He didn't argue further, just took a long sip of his coffee. That's his signature move, the silent retreat. Honestly, these conversations became our routine. I would experience the daily gauntlet of low-effort men, and he would be the sounding board for my frustrations. It wasn't just dating, it was everywhere. The guy at the electronics store who talked to my chest while explaining phone plans, the coworker who called me buddy in meetings, the endless stream of men online who thought "hey" was a complete sentence. I would bring all of this to Jim, expecting solidarity, and what I'd get was quiet, frustratingly logical neutrality. He never outright disagreed with me, but he never fully agreed either. He'd just listen, nod, and occasionally offer some benign, unhelpful, alternative perspective. I felt like I was screaming into a void, but at least the void bought me coffee. The loneliness was the worst part. Some nights I'd just scroll through social media and see all these happy couples, people getting engaged, buying houses, adopting dogs, and here I was, stuck in a revolving door of men who either couldn't find me on a map of their own emotional landscape or thought feminism was a personal attack on their right to make bad jokes. I complained to Jim about this constantly. How was I supposed to find a partner when the available pool of men was so deeply flawed? He once asked me what my ideal man would even be like. I told him it wasn't that complicated. Someone who is emotionally intelligent, actively anti-racist and anti-sexist, understands his own privilege, does his own inner work, and is a good communicator. Also, he needs to be taller than me, have a good job, and a decent sense of humor. It's not that big of an ask. Jim raised an eyebrow. Sounds like you're looking for a unicorn. I told him I was just looking for a decent human being who had read a book. The conversation then drifted to his own life. He was always so private. He never seemed to date much, or, if he did, he never talked about it. He spent most of his free time with his friends. It was always this vague, faceless group. Going to play board games with the guys. Grabbing a beer with my friends. I never met them, not once. In all the years we'd been friends, he kept that part of his life completely separate. I tried asking about them once or twice. What are your friends like? He would just give a non-committal shrug. They're just guys. We play video games, watch sports. You'd be bored. I remember feeling a little hurt by that. Like he thought I was too one-dimensional to hang out with a group of normal guys. But I let it go. He was entitled to his own space, I guess. Thinking back, there was one time he tried to bridge that gap. It was probably about a year ago. He came to me all excited, saying he wanted me to meet one of his friends. He described the guy as sweet, smart, and a really talented musician. I was skeptical, given my track record, but Jim seemed so earnest about it. He swore this guy was different. So I agreed. We met for drinks at some quiet bar. The friend was fine, perfectly nice, a little shy. He had kind eyes, I guess. He talked about his band and his job in IT. It was all very standard. I decided to steer the conversation toward something more substantial. I asked him what he thought about some of the big social issues happening at the time. He just blinked at me. He said he didn't really follow politics. A grown man in this day and age, admitting he willfully ignores what's happening in the world. Red flag number 1. I tried a different angle. I asked him what kind of books or movies he was into. He mentioned a lot of blockbuster action movies and fantasy novels. Nothing wrong with that on the surface, but it was clear he wasn't consuming any media that would challenge his worldview. I asked if he'd ever read any prominent female authors, just out of curiosity. He admitted he probably hadn't, not since high school English class. Red flag number 2. The rest of the evening was just polite, excruciating small talk. He was a perfectly nice cardboard cutout of a man. There was nothing there, no depth, no critical thought. After he left, I told Jim it was a no-go. I explained that while the guy was nice enough, he was completely unself-aware. He was living in a bubble, completely oblivious to the societal structures he benefited from. Being with him would be exhausting. It would be a constant educational project, and I was not looking for a student. I was looking for a partner. Jim looked genuinely crushed. He said he thought the guy was just a bit introverted and that he was a really good person once you got to know him. I told him that being a good person was the bare minimum. It wasn't enough. After that, he never tried to set me up with anyone again, and honestly, I was relieved. It just proved my point that he didn't really understand what I was looking for. So life continued. The bad dates piled up, and my venting sessions with Jim became more frequent and more intense. He became more and more quiet during them. His silence started to feel less like patient listening and more like judgment. He would just sit there with this unreadable expression while I poured my heart out. It started to feel like he was on their side. Then came last week. It was a Tuesday night, I think. I was at home mindlessly scrolling through my phone, trying to numb the Sunday scaries that had already started. I was on a social media app, looking at stories. And then I saw it. A post from a mutual acquaintance, someone from our old college group. It was a picture from a birthday party or some kind of get-together. In the photo, tagged and smiling, was Jim. He was standing in the middle of a group of about 5 other guys. I didn't recognize any of them. They all looked normal. They were laughing, holding drinks. They looked like a close-knit group of friends. My first thought was, oh, so these are the guys. The mysterious, nameless, faceless friends he always talked about. I zoomed in on the photo. They were all around our age. They looked like perfectly regular guys. One was kind of cute in a nerdy way. And then a second thought hit me, and it was like a bucket of ice water being dumped over my head. He'd been friends with these people for years. I'm his best friend, and I've never met a single one of them. I just stared at the picture, the smiling faces mocking me. All this time, I'd been complaining to him, telling him how I couldn't meet anyone decent, how I felt so alone. And he was sitting on a secret stash of single, seemingly normal men. It wasn't just that he hadn't introduced me. It was that he had actively hidden them from me. He had deliberately kept our worlds from colliding. The more I thought about it, the more the anger started to bubble up inside me. It felt like a profound betrayal. What was his reason? Did he think I wasn't cool enough for them? Was he ashamed of me? Or was it something more sinister? Was he protecting them from me? The thought was so insulting, it made me sick to my stomach. As if I were some kind of monster they needed to be shielded from. Me, the one who was constantly being let down and hurt by men. It was the ultimate hypocrisy. He would sit there and listen to my struggles, pretending to be my ally, all while gatekeeping a potential social circle from me. This wasn't just him having separate friends. This was a conscious, deliberate act of exclusion. I couldn't let it go. I had to confront him. My hands were shaking as I found his name in my contacts and pressed the call button. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice calm and casual. "Hey, what's up?" I didn't even bother with pleasantries. I saw the picture. There was a pause on his end. What picture? He was playing dumb. That made me even angrier. The picture from the party, with all your friends, the ones I've apparently never been allowed to meet. The line went quiet for a few seconds. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head as he tried to figure out a way to spin this. "Oh, that," he finally said. "That was just a casual thing. It wasn't a big deal." "It seems like a big deal to me, Jim. You have a whole other life you've never told me about." His voice got a little defensive. "They're just my friends. We play board games. It's not that exciting. I told you. You'd be bored." "Don't treat me like an idiot," I snapped. "You've been actively hiding them from me for years. Why?" He sighed. It was that same weary sigh he always used when he didn't want to have a real conversation. "It's not like that. It just never came up." "It never came up? I've been telling you for years that I feel isolated and can't meet anyone. And you've had a group of single friends this whole time that you've kept completely hidden. How does that not come up?" He didn't have an answer. He just mumbled something about how they're different worlds. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. He was treating me like I was the unreasonable one for being upset. I felt a surge of indignation. This is unbelievably sexist, you know that? You have your little boys' club, and I'm not allowed in. Is that it? Am I going to disrupt your male bonding with my feminine energy? "Come on, don't be ridiculous," he said, his voice starting to show a hint of annoyance. "No, you don't get to tell me I'm being ridiculous," I shot back. "You are the one who has been lying by omission for our entire friendship. I tell you everything about my life, every struggle, every bad date, and you've been keeping secrets." The conversation went around in circles for another 10 minutes. He refused to give me a straight answer. He just kept repeating the same lame excuses. "It's not personal. It's just my own thing. You're overthinking it." Every word out of his mouth was just another layer of dismissal. He wasn't just hiding his friends. He was invalidating my feelings about it. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. "I can't talk to you right now," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "We'll talk about this later." I hung up before he could respond. I just sat there in the dark, my phone clutched in my hand. The feeling of betrayal was overwhelming. He was supposed to be my best friend, the one person I could count on, and he had treated me like a liability, a problem to be managed. I thought about all the hours he'd spent listening to me. Was it all fake? Was he just sitting there, silently blaming me for my own loneliness, while actively contributing to it? The more I replayed our conversations in my head, the more it all made sense. His quietness, his non-committal answers, his refusal to ever truly take my side. It wasn't neutrality, it was complicity. He saw the world the same way all the other men did. He just hid it better. I felt foolish for ever trusting him. Then I remembered. Our mutual friend's birthday party was that weekend. He would be there. I would be there. And I wasn't going to let him get away with it. He wasn't going to hide behind vague excuses and phone calls. I was going to make him explain himself, in public. He owed me an explanation, and I was going to get it. He was going to have to look me in the eye and tell me why he thought it was acceptable to treat his supposed best friend like a secret to be kept. The anger was cold and hard in my chest now. This wasn't just about meeting his friends anymore. It was about the principle of the thing. It was about respect, loyalty, friendship, and he had failed on all counts. The party was in 3 days, and I was already planning exactly what I was going to say. The next 3 days were a blur of simmering rage. Every waking moment was consumed with replaying that phone call in my head, his weak excuses, his dismissive tone. It was like a movie I kept rewinding to find new details to be angry about. I thought about our friendship, all the years of it, and saw it through this new, ugly filter. Every time he'd quietly listened to me vent now seemed less like supportive silence and more like a calculated refusal to engage. He wasn't my friend. He was an observer, a researcher gathering data on the hysterical female to report back to his secret club of men. The thought made me feel paranoid and exposed. I considered calling some of our mutual friends to see what they knew, but I stopped myself. What would I even say? "Hey, did you know Jim has a secret life where he pretends I don't exist?" It would make me sound crazy. No, this had to be handled face to face. He needed to be held accountable in a space where he couldn't just hang up on me. I spent way too much time planning my outfit for the party. I wanted to look good. Not for him, but for me. I wanted to look confident and unbothered, like his betrayal was a minor inconvenience I was dealing with before moving on to better things. I settled on a black dress. Simple, classic, powerful. Armor. When the night of the party arrived, my stomach was in knots. It was a mix of anxiety and a weird, righteous energy. I felt like a lawyer about to deliver a closing argument that would win the case. The party was at our friend Sarah's apartment. It was already crowded when I got there. Music was playing, people were laughing, and for a second, I felt a pang of sadness. I just wanted to be a normal person enjoying a party, not someone on a mission to confront her best friend. But then I remembered the photo, his voice on the phone, and the anger came flooding back, sharpening my resolve. I got a drink and started mingling, making small talk while my eyes scanned the room for him. It took about 20 minutes, but then I saw him. He was by the kitchen, leaning against the counter, talking to a small group of people. He was laughing at something someone said. He looked completely relaxed, totally at ease. Seeing him so happy, so oblivious to the turmoil he'd caused me, was like pouring gasoline on a fire. How could he just go on like nothing happened? Did our friendship mean so little to him that he could shatter my trust and then just show up to a party and laugh? I watched him for a while, letting my anger build into a cold, hard certainty. He was talking to Sarah and a couple of other people we both knew well. Perfect. There were enough people to be witnesses, but not so many that it would become a huge, unmanageable scene. I took a deep breath, straightened my dress, and started walking toward him. It felt like everything was happening in slow motion. The music seemed to fade, and all I could hear was the pounding in my own ears. He saw me approaching and smiled. A real, genuine smile. "Hey, Ava, I was wondering when you'd get here." The casual warmth in his voice was the final insult. I didn't smile back. I stopped a few feet from his group, making sure I had everyone's attention. Sarah noticed my expression, and her own smile faltered. "Is everything okay?" That was my cue. "No, actually," I said, my voice coming out stronger and steadier than I expected. "I was just hoping Jim could explain something to me. To all of us, really." The small group went quiet. Jim's smile vanished. He knew exactly what was coming. "I think our friends should know what a loyal and honest person you are, Jim," I continued, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "I think they should know that for years, while I've been telling you how lonely I am, how impossible it is to meet decent men, you've been hiding an entire group of single friends from me." His face was a mask. He didn't say anything, just stared at me. "I had to find out from a social media post. Like a stranger," I said, letting the hurt show in my voice. "My best friend has a whole separate life he's been deliberately walling off from me. I just want to know why. Am I not good enough for your friends? Are you ashamed of me? Or is this just some kind of pathetic boys' club where no girls are allowed?" I looked around at the others, who were all watching this exchange with wide, uncomfortable eyes. He won't give me a straight answer. He just feeds me condescending lines about how I'd be bored. So I'm asking you now, in front of everyone, what is the real reason, Jim? I crossed my arms and waited. I had him. He was trapped. He couldn't hang up. He couldn't walk away without looking like a coward. He just stood there for what felt like an eternity. The silence was so thick you could feel it. I could see a muscle twitching in his jaw. When he finally spoke, his voice was unnervingly calm. It wasn't the sound of someone who was cornered. It was the sound of someone who had made a decision. "You're right, Eva," he said, his eyes locked on mine. "You deserve an explanation." I felt a small flicker of triumph. He was finally going to admit it. "I did hide my friends from you, for years. That part is true." He paused, and it felt like the entire room was holding its breath. "But you're completely wrong about the reason." He took a small step forward. The others in the group almost subconsciously shuffled back, giving us space. "It was never about me being ashamed of you. And it was certainly not a boys' club. I was protecting them." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "Protecting them? From what?" "From you," he said, and the words hit me with the force of a physical slap. My smile froze on my face. "You want to know my friends?" he went on, his voice still quiet, but now carrying an edge of steel. "Let me tell you about them. You saw that guy in the photo with the glasses? That's Henry. He's a software developer. He's one of the kindest, most genuine people I have ever met. He spends one Saturday a month volunteering at the local animal shelter, not because it looks good on a dating profile, but because he actually cares about animals." He didn't take his eyes off me. "Do you know what you would have done to him, Eva? You would have sat across from him at a coffee shop, and within 10 minutes, you would have decided he was unworthy. You would have dismissed his passion for video games as childish. You would have seen his shyness not as a personality trait, but as a fatal flaw. You would have written him off, and then you would have come to me to complain about how there are no good men right after you'd thrown one away for not meeting your impossible, ever-changing standards." My mouth was dry. I couldn't form a word. "Remember that musician friend I introduced you to a year ago?" he asked. The question was rhetorical. He wasn't waiting for an answer. A good, gentle guy who just wanted to share his music with the world. You put him through an ideological purity test. You interrogated him on his political beliefs and judged him for not having read the right authors. You made him feel stupid and inadequate because his hobbies weren't academically approved by you. He told me afterward that it felt less like a date and more like a hostile job interview he was destined to fail. You crushed his confidence, and for what? So you could have another story about how men are uneducated? My face was burning. I could feel everyone's eyes on me. They weren't looking at him with disapproval anymore. They were looking at me. My friends are not your social experiments, Jim said, his voice low and intense. They're not subjects for your thesis on toxic masculinity. They're just people, good people. They have jobs, they have hobbies, they have insecurities, and they are trying their best. They deserve to meet someone who sees them as a person, not as a representative of their entire gender who has to answer for the crimes of the patriarchy on the first date. He gestured vaguely around the room, then back at me. You don't look for a partner, Eva. You look for a project, or a punching bag. You collect grievances like they're trading cards. You thrive on the disappointment. I think deep down, you don't actually want to find someone, because if you did, you'd have to stop complaining. And you don't know who you are without the complaint. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, hitting every insecurity I had. So, yes, I hid them. I protected them from your judgment, from your tests, from your condescension. I listened to you complain for years, hoping you'd eventually realize that the common denominator in all your failed relationships was you. But you never did. You just got angrier and more bitter. He finally took a breath. My loyalty is to people who deserve it, to friends who support each other without tearing others down. I chose them over your endless, exhausting negativity. It was not a hard choice. He finished speaking. The silence that followed was absolute. I opened my mouth to say something, to defend myself, but nothing came out. What could I say? He had used my own history, my own words, as evidence against me. He had taken my narrative and ripped it to shreds in front of everyone I knew. I looked at Sarah. She was staring at the floor. I looked at the other faces in the group. They wouldn't meet my eyes. There was no sympathy there. Only a dawning, horrifying understanding. They had all heard my complaints for years, too. And now they had just heard the truth. I felt naked, humiliated. Jim just looked at me for one last moment, his expression not angry anymore, just sad and tired. Then he turned around, said a quiet, "I should go," to Sarah, and walked out of the apartment. The door clicked shut behind him, and it felt like a final judgment. The spell was broken. The music seemed to start up again, but it sounded distant and muted. People started talking again, but in hushed, awkward tones. No one talked to me. My little group of witnesses just sort of melted away, finding other conversations to join. I stood there alone in the middle of the room, my drink still in my hand. My armor was gone. I just felt cold. I stayed for another 10 minutes, a monument to my own social destruction, before I couldn't take it anymore. I put my untouched drink down and walked out without saying goodbye to anyone. The walk home was a blur. The city lights were just streaks of color through the tears I didn't even realize I was crying. He was right. He was right about everything. The thought was a bitter pill to swallow. In the days that followed, the silence was deafening. My phone didn't ring. My text to Jim went unanswered. Even my casual messages to other friends from the party were met with short, polite, but distant replies. I had been so worried about him excluding me from his world. In the end, I had gotten myself excluded from my own. I had no one left to complain to, no one to vent to. There was just me and the quiet, uncomfortable truth of what I had become. I was the toxic one. I was the red flag. And I was completely, utterly alone.